Rain tapped the hood of the black car as it rolled to a stop in front of the old brick building. The landlord, Victor Hale, stood under the awning with a paper cup of coffee and a bored look. He watched the rear door open. A little girl stepped out first, a pink umbrella in her small hand. Behind her came her mother and father. Their clothes were neat, clean, and new. Their faces were calm. A woman in a gray suit joined them with a folder. A man from the bank followed, carrying a clipboard. Victor's smile twitched. He had seen these three on the sidewalk just days ago with their things in boxes. He had watched a teddy bear fall into a puddle. Now they walked toward him like they were the ones who owned the rain and the morning. The woman in the gray suit raised the folder. "We're here to close," she said, "on the purchase." The girl looked up at Victor with clear eyes and said, "Hi, Mr. Victor." The coffee in his cup tasted like metal. 3 days earlier, the hallway smelled like bleach and old paint. A yellow notice hung crooked on the door. Final. The word felt heavy in Marco's mouth as he read it. He held the notice with both hands because they were shaking. Alina stood beside him, pressing their daughter Leah to her side. It was early. The light through the window was thin. They had hoped for more time. They had hoped Victor would accept half the rent now and half next week. Marco had lost his job at the warehouse. The company had closed a whole line. They said it was not personal. It never is. Alina's catering had slowed after a client backed out of a big event. They were 2 weeks behind, then 4. He had smiled and said, "Business is business." Movers hired by the building showed up with dull faces and fast hands. Boxes that had held their life were suddenly on the street, leaning like tired men. Marco grabbed their photo frames and wrapped them in a winter sweater. Alina put Leah on the steps with a blanket and a thermos of hot chocolate. Rosa from 3C brought a plastic bag for the small things, spices, pens, the alarm clock with the missing button. She shook her head and muttered, "He's been tightening the screws for months." Victor appeared halfway through. He wore a scarf that matched his gloves. He praised the movers for being efficient. He told Marco he could leave the keys in the office mail slot. He told Alina that late fees were posted on the door last week. Leah stared at him and hugged her bear. Victor saw and looked away, bored. He said, "Deadlines exist, to no one and everyone." When the last box was on the sidewalk and the door clicked shut, the building felt like it exhaled. Marco crouched to Leah's height. He said, "We have a plan." Alina nodded. "We won't stay out here, not for long." Rosa snapped her fingers. She said, "Come to the church hall. There's hot food. There are people." The church hall smelled like coffee and onions and hope held together with tape. Folding tables were set up, flyers blanketed the walls. Tenants' rights, free legal clinic Tuesday, a city pilot for limited equity co-ops. A sheet of paper with a phone number had the word auction written in thick marker. Rosa pointed at it and said, "The rumor is the building is upside down. Victor's been pulling cash out for years. There's a balloon payment due." Marco stared at the word auction. He knew pictures of things, not contracts. He had stacked boxes, lifted pallets, counted inventory until his shoulders burned, but he could read numbers on a page and feel the weight of them. Alina traced the letters with her finger. She asked in a quiet, hopeful tone, "Is this real?" Rosa nodded. She said, "We need proof, but I think it's real." A man with a clipboard introduced himself as Daniel from the housing nonprofit. He had soft eyes and a quick way of writing notes. He said, "If the bank takes the building, there might be a small window. If tenants organize as a co-op, the city can help with funds. But we would need an investor partner. And fast." He looked at the family. He said, "I'm sorry for what happened today," and he meant it. Marco swallowed. He said, "We don't even have a place tonight." Daniel nodded again. He said quietly, "There's a list for shelters, and there's also a room in the back for a few nights if you need it." He tapped the auction flyer. He said, "There may be another way. It is not a promise, but it is not impossible." Jonah showed up with a pizza box and a laptop that still smelled like the store. He took one look at the stacked boxes and the thin blankets in the church hall and sat on the floor like it was a boardroom table. He opened city records, scrolled fast, and found what rumors had guessed: a notice of default. A trustee sale listed for the courthouse steps. 4 days. A narrow line in the code offered tenants a chance if they formed a co-op and proved they could close. "It's tight," Jonah said, fingers hovering, but tight is not no. Rosa gathered the neighbors. Daniel from the nonprofit brought clipboards. Names were written, phone numbers were checked. A small steering group formed on the spot. Alina was made chair by a quick vote. Marco took operations. Rosa took outreach. They shook hands like this was already real. Daniel drew boxes on a whiteboard. Incorporate the co-op, choose interim officers, draft budget, hire licensed property manager, secure bridge funds, submit pre-application to city, show the bank a real plan. Each box had a deadline. Each deadline looked like a wall and a door. Alina read the budget that Jonah drafted. Fair rents, she said, repair reserve, insurance, taxes, management fee, emergency fund. The numbers were plain and honest. No tricks, no golden edges, just a working building that would not bleed tenants dry. People volunteered. A plumber from 2B offered hours. A retired bookkeeper said she would help with ledgers. A high school teacher promised to tutor kids in the basement room if the co-op won. The room warmed. The air felt thicker, not with smoke, but with the weight of shared effort. They needed a licensed manager. Daniel gave 2 names. Jonah called the first, no answer. He called the second, a woman named Marta Chen, who had saved 3 small buildings from sliding into neglect. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Marta, we need a letter of engagement fast. Limited equity co-op, small, tight timeline, good people." Marta asked 4 hard questions. Alina answered 2, Daniel answered the rest. Marta took a breath and said, "Send me the numbers. If they're honest, I'll sign by morning." Alina smiled for the first time that day. "Honest is all we have," she said. Jonah messaged 2 angel investors he knew from a past life. Community return, low interest, 30-day bridge, backed by city allocation once approved. One replied with a single word, "Deck." Jonah attached slides. The other sent a thumbs up and wrote, "Call in 10." The slides were simple. Photo of the building, photo of the people, a chart of repairs needed now versus later, a line that read, "Ownership with dignity." Another line, "Stability beats speculation." No fireworks, just truth you could hold. Night stretched. The church hall hummed like a quiet engine. People took turns at the laptop. Names were spelled twice, numbers checked thrice. Marco counted chairs, then counted courage. He practiced saying the words, "We are buying," until they stopped sounding strange. Leah drew the building with 12 smiling windows and a cat in one of them because she wanted a cat someday. She colored the front door red. "Red means we come home," she told Alina, who kissed her hair and nodded. Near midnight, Jonah's phone chirped. Angel 1 wired a small tranche to escrow. Not enough to buy the world, enough to prove they were not heir. Angel 2 wanted a letter from the city saying the project qualified for its program. Daniel said, "We can get a pre-app letter by noon." Morning brought strong coffee and sorebacks. Alina practiced her opening remarks. "We are tenants. We pay fair. We fix what breaks. We keep families housed. We will not squeeze. We will steward." She underlined steward 3 times. At the city office, a staffer named Miss Patel met them with a stack of forms and a tired smile that still had kindness in it. She had seen many plans die on paper. She read their numbers, looked up, and simply said, "You did your homework." Miss Patel explained the rules in small, clear pieces. You can assert first right as a tenant co-op if the trustee sale happens and the bank takes title. You will have a matching window. You must show funds and management. We will issue a pre-application acknowledgement, not a guarantee. "That's enough to keep the door open," Daniel said. "We'll take it." They signed where told. Miss Patel stamped the paper with a heavy thud that sounded like a heart agreeing. Across town, Victor Hale paced his office. He called his lender twice and left messages dressed in confidence and perfume. He told his assistant to prep rent adjustments across the portfolio and to tighten collections. His voice was smooth, his eyes were not. Auctions are noise. The market wobbles, I do not. But when he hung up, he stared at the blot on his ledgers where the numbers did not obey him. Back at the church hall, Rosa passed out empanadas to anyone who forgot to eat. She said, "This is something we do together. No one goes hungry, no one stands alone." The words were soft armor that fit everyone. Daniel spoke to the room. "This is not a sure thing. It's a legal path with many stones. We will step on each one together. If we fall holding hands. If we stand as owners." Marco raised his hand. "I will knock doors," he said. "Every floor, every unit, today." Alina said, "I will speak for us at the bank. Clear, simple, no excuses." Jonah made a schedule. Door-knocking pairs, a called tree, a rides list for elders, a quiet presence group for the auction morning. No shouting, no shoving, just witnesses with steady eyes. Marta called back by noon. "Your numbers are honest," she said. "I will sign an engagement letter for management upon award. I will not promise miracles. I promise the routine work that keeps roofs from failing." "Routine work is our miracle," Alina said, and meant it.
They walked into the bank branch with Daniel and the lawyer. The manager with gray hair sat them down, read the pre-app acknowledgement, read the escrow note, and folded her hands. "If the trustee sale goes as scheduled and the bank takes it back, your window starts. Be ready to move faster than you think you can." Alina nodded. "We will be ready," she said. "We are not asking for a favor. We are making a lawful purchase with partners at a fair price." The manager's mouth softened. "Bring me your packet the same day the sale posts," she said. "I prefer organized buyers." They left with a list 10 items long. Updated financials, proof of engagement from Marta, formal co-op articles, a draft of bylaws, pledge letters from tenants, a repair plan prioritized by safety, boiler, roof patches, and stair rails. By sunset, the co-op had a name, Red Door Homes. Leah clapped because she had picked the color with her crayon. People signed the pledge to join and to keep rents fair. The signatures were not fancy, they were strong. The day before the auction, Victor tried once more to patch his hole. He offered a lender a higher rate, faster fees, whatever polished words could buy. The lender smiled, the way people smile when they are already gone. Victor hung up and stared at the rain. Jonah briefed everyone. "Tomorrow, we do not bid, we witness. If a third party buys at a price we cannot match, we pivot. If the bank takes it back, we move on our right. No surprises, no panic." That night, in the church hall, Alina braided Leah's hair and told a small story about seeds. "They look like nothing," she said. "But you water them and wait, and one day there is shade." Leah fell asleep holding her drawing of the red door. Marco stood by the window and rehearsed one more time. "We will be good owners," he said to the glass. "We will fix what breaks. We will pay what's due. We will not throw people out to make a number look pretty." Rosa lit a votive in the little chapel. and whispered the names of families who had left in the last year. She asked for steady hands and clear minds. She asked for less fear. Morning came gray and wet. The courthouse steps shone like mirrors. People gathered in coats and quiet. A clerk set up a small wooden podium and a speaker that made every cough sound official. Investors with umbrellas checked their watches. A couple of bargain hunters tried to look seasoned. The bank's representative, neat as a pin, stood with a folder that had tabs in 5 colors. Red Door Homes stood together on the lower steps. No signs, no chance, just faces. Jonah at one end, Daniel at the other, Alina and Marco in the middle. Rosa with 3 neighbors holding a thermos of coffee like a flag. The auctioneer tapped the mic, read a legal paragraph, and called the address of Victor's building. Opening with the bank's credit bid. Any higher bids? His voice bounced off the stone and came back thinner. Silence. Shoes scraped. A pigeon flapped. Numbers were too high for hunters and too risky for strangers. The rain made small rivers in the grooves of the steps. No other bids, the auctioneer said at last. Property reverts to beneficiary. The gavel was a small piece of wood, but when it hit, it sounded like a door unlatching. Alina squeezed Marco's hand once. Jonah exhaled. Daniel pulled out the packet with tabs that matched the bank's. Rosa murmured, "Now we move." Across the plaza, Victor watched from under the awning of the cafe, a paper cup turning cold in his hand. He told himself this was a pause, not an ending. But the pause felt like someone else holding the remote. Red Door Homes walked as one toward the bank office to assert their right. The pre-application stamped, the escrow note ready, the engagement letter from Marta signed in neat, careful ink. They were still just people with umbrellas and cheap shoes, but they carried something larger than luck. They carried a plan that had been built overnight and held together by hands that would not let go. And the window, small, sharp, and real, was open. They stepped through.
The rain followed them to the bank office, drumming on umbrellas and dripping onto the marble lobby floor. A receptionist looked up as the group entered, her eyes widening at the sight of so many people arriving together. Daniel stepped forward, calm and polite, announcing their purpose. "We are Red Door Homes Cooperative. We are here to assert our right of first refusal." The receptionist blinked, then stood. "Please wait a moment." She disappeared through a side door. The group sat in stiff chairs, their wet coats steaming faintly. Leah curled up beside Alina, her red door drawing clutched against her chest. Minutes stretched like hours until the gray-haired bank manager appeared, the same one they had spoken to before. She carried a folder in her hands. Her eyes flicked across the group and then to the pre-application papers Daniel was holding. "You have come fast," she said, not unkindly. "That's good. Time is everything in this process." She led them into a conference room where the table seemed too big for the group. "Let's see what you have." One by one, the pieces were laid down. The escrow letter from the angel investor, the signed engagement agreement from Marta Chen, the co-op's incorporation papers hot off the notary's desk, the pre-application acknowledgement stamped by Miss Patel, and finally, pledge letters from the tenants, their signatures uneven but real. The manager read slowly, turning each page as if weighing it in her hands. She asked questions, Daniel answered. Alina spoke clearly, never rushing. "We are not speculators," she said. "We are families. We will pay what is due. We will maintain the property. We will not strip it." The manager nodded once. "These are in order," she said. "I will forward them to the trustee division. They will review and contact you within 5 business days. Be ready to deliver the balance of earnest money when called. If you delay, the window closes." Jonah leaned forward. "We're ready," he said. "The second investor is finalizing now. The nonprofit has offered a guarantee bridge. We can move fast." The manager allowed herself the faintest smile. "Then you have a chance." When they left the building, the rain had softened. The clouds hung low, but not so dark.
People walked with a little more lift in their steps. Leah pointed at a puddle shaped like a heart and laughed. Across town, Victor Hale was on the phone again, this time with his lawyer. His voice was sharp, cutting the air like broken glass. They're trying to steal it from under me. Tenants of all people. I built that portfolio. They think they can run a building? They'll collapse in 6 months. The lawyer, older and slower, replied evenly. The law is clear, Victor. If the co-op meets the conditions, the bank is obliged to accept them. You should focus on your other assets. Victor slammed a hand on his desk, papers scattered like frightened birds. No, this is mine. I will not lose it to them. He stared at the window, where rain streaks blurred the city into gray. Somewhere out there, the family he had thrown into the street was walking towards ownership. The thought turned his coffee sour. Back at the church hall, the mood was cautious but electric. The word spread quickly. The bank had accepted their packet. Now the real work began. The co-op needed full funding lined up and every tenant on board. Rosa organized evening meetings in the hall. People crowded in. Some skeptical, some hopeful, all curious. Marco spoke plainly, scanning before them with no papers, just his hands and his heart. We can own this building together. We can keep it safe, fair, and ours. But we must be united. No one can do it alone. His words carried weight, because everyone had seen him on the sidewalk with his daughter's bear. Some tenants shook their heads. It's too big. We don't have the money. What if we fail? Alina stepped forward. We are already paying rent. We are already working. This is not about dreaming. This is about paying into something that protects us, not bleeds us. We will not be alone. The city stands with us, the nonprofit stands with us, investors stand with us. The risk is real, but so is the reward. Bit by bit, doubts softened. People signed the pledges forms. The retired bookkeeper collected small deposits as earnest proof. The plumber began listing repairs. Hope spread like fire catching in dry grass, quiet but relentless. Jonah stayed up late every night, working the numbers, sending updates to the angels, preparing draft agreements. His eyes burned, but he smiled when he saw the tenants lining up with their pledge slips. "This is the best deck I've ever built," he muttered, tapping at his screen. Meanwhile, Victor was not idle. He visited the building himself, striding through the halls with forced confidence. He cornered tenants, offering small bribes, whispering doubts. "Do you really think Marco and his wife can run this place? Do you want your heat going out in winter because amateurs are in charge?" Some tenants looked uneasy, others turned away. Rosa confronted him in the stairwell, her eyes blazing. "We've seen what you call management. Broken boilers, rising rents, no repairs. Your time is over." Victor sneered, but said no more. He left with his scarf tight around his neck, but the sound of Rosa's words followed him down the stairs. The bank's call came sooner than expected. 3 business days later, the gray-haired bank manager phoned Daniel. "Your packet is accepted. You have 30 days to close. Be advised, failure to deliver full payment will void your right. Do you understand?" Daniel answered calmly. "We understand. Funds are being finalized. You'll have them." When he hung up, cheers erupted in the hall. People clapped, hugged, even cried. Leah twirled in the aisle with her drawing, shouting, "Red door wins, red door wins." But Daniel raised a hand. "This is not victory yet. This is the beginning of the real battle. 30 days, every dollar, every paper, every signature. That is what stands between us and ownership." The room sobered quickly, yet determination remained. Plans accelerated. Jonah confirmed the second investor, Marta drafted the first repair plan, Marco organized weekend workdays to show commitment. Elena coordinated communication with tenants, ensuring no one felt left out. Victor tried again, calling contacts in the city, pressing for loopholes, but the law was solid. Unless the co-op failed, his grip was broken. He began speaking of lawsuits, of tortious interference, of bad faith. His lawyer sighed and reminded him of costs. Still, Victor raged, pacing like a lion in a shrinking cage. The co-op pressed forward. Tenants painted banners not for protest, but for unity. Our home, our future. Children traced their handprints in red paint to symbolize the red door. Leah insisted hers be in the center. At the quarter-mile mark in the race, Noah's feet heard less than any part of him, and now his thoughts were clearer. He needed to pace. He slowed down and found a rhythm that felt comfortable. He focused on the gentle incline, feeling the warmth of the sun on his back. The birds were chirping, and he could see the reflection of the sun in the lake. He knew he was mostly home. The final piece was the inspection. Marta walked through every hallway with a clipboard, marking the leaks, the cracks, the wiring faults. Her notes were blunt but fair. "This is not a palace," she told them, "but it is not a ruin. With steady care, it will stand for decades. If you keep it together, it will serve you better than any landlord chasing profit." Her words became a mantra whispered among tenants. Steady care, steady hands. At night, Marco and Alina sat together on a bench outside the hall. The city was quiet, except for distant sirens and the drip of rain from the eaves. Marco looked at his wife, his voice soft. "We were on the street a week ago." Alina took his hand, and now we are knocking on ownership's door, the red one. They sat in silence, watching the reflection of the streetlights in the puddles, knowing the hardest days were still ahead, but also knowing they were no longer walking alone.
The countdown began the moment Daniel hung up the phone. 30 days. That was the time Red Door Homes had to transform papers, promises, and hope into the ownership of an entire building. The church hall became their command center. Tables were pushed together. Clipboards hung on hooks. A whiteboard tracked tasks with dates written in thick marker. Each night, people crossed off boxes. Each morning, new boxes appeared. Jonah managed the finances. He kept a running ledger of every dollar pledged and every cent promised. He updated the group with charts projected onto the wall, numbers climbing slowly but surely. "We need transparency," he said. "Everyone sees where the money goes. No secrets." Marco took operations. He organized maintenance walkthroughs with Marta, documenting everything from leaking faucets to broken stair rails. "If we're going to own this," he said, "we start acting like owners now." Tenants joined him with tools, patching holes, tightening hinges, cleaning corners neglected for years. The building began to change, not with expensive renovations, but with care. Olina became the voice. She coordinated communication with tenants, held listening circles, and answered questions. Some residents were nervous, afraid of change. Others were skeptical. She listened without judgment, speaking calmly, assuring them that ownership meant stability. Her presence turned doubt into participation. Rosa became the heart. She cooked meals for meetings, organized childcare so parents could attend, and checked in on elders. "A co-op isn't just papers," she said. "It's neighbors remembering they belong to each other." Momentum grew. Local news picked up the story. A reporter snapped photos of children painting a mural of a red door on the side of the church hall. The headline read, "Tennies fight to buy back their homes." Calls came in from volunteers, offering time and donations. The energy was contagious. Victor read the article in his office with clenched fists. Fools, they're playing at business. Yet beneath his anger was a gnawing unease. He had underestimated them. What he thought would collapse under pressure was instead hardening into resolve. He doubled down on sabotage. He sent letters claiming tenants were still in arrears, hoping to spook the bank. He spread rumors that the co-op was unstable. But Daniel countered each move with calm professionalism, filing rebuttals, presenting receipts, and documenting every attempt. Meanwhile, Jonah secured the second investor's commitment. "Funds will be released in 2 weeks," the investor confirmed. "Your plan is lean but sound. We like lean." Jonah relayed the news, and the hall erupted in applause. Still, he warned, 2 weeks is not 30 days. We stay sharp. As deadlines loomed, tension simmered. Small disagreements flared. How much to set aside for immediate repairs, whether to raise monthly contributions by a few dollars more, who would sit on the first co-op board. Voices grew heated, but each time Alina brought them back.
"We are not here to fight each other," she reminded them. "We are here to fight for this building, for all of us." Marco noticed how Leah listened to everything. She no longer asked when they would go back home. She said, "When we own it, can I plant flowers by the steps?" Her hope was quiet but unshakable. It gave Marco strength. The days blurred into one another. Forms were filed, letters were signed. Marta prepared a detailed management plan. Daniel drafted bylaws with tenant input. Jonah updated the angels daily. Rosa kept everyone fed. Alina held the center steady. Then came the site visit from the bank's trustees division. 3 officials arrived in suits, walking the halls with clipboards. They peered into boiler rooms, checked fire exits, and scribbled notes. The tenants trailed behind anxiously, whispering. One inspector turned to Marco. "This stair rail is loose, unsafe." Marco nodded quickly. "We've already scheduled repair. Materials are in the basement. It will be fixed by Friday." The inspector made another note. The group held their breath. At the end of the tour, the gray-haired manager from the branch nodded. "You are prepared. Continue this way and you'll close without issue." Relief swept through the group like a tide. That night, the hall was filled with laughter for the first time. Children ran between the tables. Adults shared stories, not just of hardship, but of dreams. A young couple talked about starting a daycare in one of the ground floor rooms. An older tenant spoke about creating a reading nook for seniors. The building was no longer just walls. It was a canvas. Victor, however, refused to surrender. He attempted to file an injunction, claiming the tenants had misled the bank. His lawyer presented it with reluctance, but the judge dismissed it swiftly. The law is clear. This is their right. Victor's fury boiled over. He stormed into the building unannounced, shouting in the lobby, "You think you can beat me? You'll drown in debt. You'll regret this." His words echoed down the hallways, startling children and rattling nerves. Marco stood tall, facing him. "We are not afraid of you anymore, Victor. Your time here is done." For a moment, Victor faltered. He saw not the trembling tenant he had once evicted, but a man who had found his footing. With a snarl, he turned on his heel and left, slamming the door behind him. The final week arrived. Funding was in escrow. The bylaws were complete. The management agreement was signed. The co-op board was elected, Alina as chair, Marco as vice chair, Rosa as secretary, and 3 other tenants as members. Red Door Homes was official in every way but name on the deed. The day of closing, tension was thick enough to touch. The group assembled in the bank's conference room. Documents lay in neat stacks, pens lined up beside them. The gray-haired manager looked over the room. "Do you have the funds?" Jonah slid the papers across the table. "In full." She reviewed, checked, and finally nodded. "Then all that remains is signature." Alina reached for the pen. Her hand trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "For all of us," she whispered, and signed. Marco followed, then Rosa, then each board member. One by one, names filled the page. When the last signature was done, the manager stamped the document with a heavy seal. "Congratulations. Red Door Homes Cooperative is now the owner of this building." Cheers erupted. People hugged, cried, and laughed all at once. Leah jumped into Marco's arms, waving her red door drawing like a flag. "We did it, Papa! We did it!" The moment was overwhelming. For the families who had been tenants, for the neighbors who had feared eviction, for the little girl who had stood on the street clutching her bear, it was nothing short of triumph. Victor heard the news in his office. He sat motionless, staring at the wall. For the first time, the silence was louder than his anger. He had lost, not just a building, but the control he had wielded so easily. And somewhere deep inside, though he would never admit, he knew it was his own greed that had undone him. Meanwhile, at the building, Red Door Homes held a small celebration in the courtyard. Neighbors strung lights between windows. Children played tag on the grass. Music spilled from an old speaker, cheerful and imperfect. Marco raised a glass of soda. "To dignity," he said. "To home." "To Red Door," the crowd shouted back. And as night fell, the building glowed, not with wealth or profit, but with belonging.
The ink on the closing documents was barely dry when reality set in. Owning the building was a victory, but it was also a responsibility that weighed heavily. The tenants were no longer renters, they were co-owners, bound together not just by walls, but by duty. The first board meeting of Red Door Homes was held in the basement community room. Folding chairs circled a long table, and Marta Chen sat at the head with her clipboard. "Congratulations," she said, her tone both kind and businesslike. "Now the work begins. Ownership is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of one." Marco leaned forward. "What's first?" Marta flipped through her notes. "The boiler. It's overdue for servicing, and winter is coming. We'll need to allocate funds immediately." The plumber from 2B raised his hand. "I can take a look. Not for free," he added, "but for fair." The board agreed unanimously. The sense of cooperation filled the room. Next came stair rails, then fire alarms, then hallway lights. Each item required discussion, a vote, and a decision. It was slow, sometimes tedious, but it was theirs. No one in the room took it lightly. Alina guided the meeting with patience. She reminded everyone that while ownership gave them freedom, it also demanded unity. "We can disagree," she said, "but we must never forget why we did this, to protect each other." After the meeting, Marco walked through the halls, inspecting repairs in progress. He passed neighbors who smiled for the first time in months. Children played in the lobby, their laughter bouncing off freshly painted walls. The building was beginning to breathe differently. News spread through the city. Other tenant groups reached out to Daniel and Rosa asking how they had done it. Community organizations invited Alina to speak at forums. "Tell your story," they urged. "Show others that it's possible." At one gathering, Alina stood before a crowded room. She described eviction day, the boxes on the street, Leah clutching her bear. She spoke of the flyer in the church hall, of Jonah's laptop glowing late into the night, of neighbors stepping up one by one. The audience listened in silence, many wiping their eyes. When she finished, applause thundered. Reporters quoted her words, "We were thrown out, but we came back together. We turned fear into ownership, and if we can do it, others can too." Victor read those words with a bitter taste in his mouth. He tried to ignore the rising tide of public support, but it gnawed at him. Investors began to whisper about his failures. Tenants in his other buildings grew restless, emboldened by Red Door's story. For the first time in years, his reputation cracked. He visited the building again, but this time he didn't storm in. He lingered across the street, watching the new sign by the entrance, Red Door Homes Cooperative. The painted red door symbol stood bold against the brick. Children played under it, unafraid. Victor's chest tightened. He turned away quickly, but the image stayed with him. Inside, life settled into rhythm. The co-op board rotated tasks, neighbors attended monthly meetings, and Marta oversaw finances with precision. Bills were paid on time. Repairs happened steadily. For the first time, tenants felt secure. Marco found work again, helping a local delivery company redesign their warehouse routes. He brought the same determination he'd shown in the co-op. Alina expanded her catering, her business thriving as word of her leadership spread. Rosa turned the basement into a small community kitchen, offering cooking classes for kids. Leah adjusted easily. She decorated her new room with her drawing of the red door taped above her bed. She planted flowers by the steps, just as she had promised. Every morning she checked them before school, watering them carefully. "They're growing, Papa," she said proudly, "just like us." One evening, the co-op held a celebration dinner in the courtyard. Tables were set with simple dishes cooked by tenants. String lights glowed overhead. Neighbors laughed and shared stories. It wasn't extravagant,
but it was joyous. Alina stood to speak. We are not just owners of a building. We are stewards of each other. This is what Victor could never understand. Profit fades, but community endures. The crowd raised their glasses. To Red Door. Victor, sitting alone in his high-rise apartment, heard of the dinner through a news report. He stared at the screen, the laughter of the tenants filling the room. He muted the television, but could not silence the echo. The weeks passed and challenges continued. A leak appeared in the roof, a tenant missed a payment, a dispute arose over hallway cleaning schedules. But instead of fear, there was process. Meetings were held, votes were cast, solutions were found. It was messy, imperfect, but alive. One afternoon, Marta pulled Marco aside. You've stepped up as a leader. Have you thought about pursuing training in property management? You have a natural sense for it. Marco laughed softly. I never imagined myself in that role, but maybe this building changed more than just my address. Alina overheard and smiled. It changed all of us. Meanwhile, Rosa launched a tenants network connecting buildings across the city. She used Red Door's story as inspiration, helping others explore co-op ownership. Soon, whispers spread that Red Door was not the end of something, it was the beginning of a movement. Victor grew more isolated. His empire shrank as lawsuits piled up, investors pulled back. He attended fewer meetings, his voice less commanding. The power he'd wielded so easily slipped through his fingers like sand. But Red Door Homes stood firm. Each month, tenants gathered to review finances, approve repairs, and celebrate small victories. Children chalked drawings on the sidewalks. Elders rested on benches, watching the flowers Leah had planted bloom in bright colors. Marco looked around one evening as the sun set behind the building. For the first time in years, he felt peace. We made a home, he whispered to Alina. She squeezed his hand. And no one can take it away again. The building, once a symbol of fear, now stood as a testament to resilience. Its red door gleamed in the fading light, a promise kept. And so the family who had once been cast out returned not as tenants, but as owners, proving that dignity, when defended together, could withstand anything.
The first flush of victory slowly gave way to the steady grind of responsibility. Red Door Homes was strong, but strength had to be proven daily. Winter arrived early that year. The boiler, though repaired, struggled under the weight of freezing nights. Marco spent hours in the basement with the plumber from 2B, checking gauges, patching leaks, and learning the system. It's old, the plumber warned. Patchable now, but in 2 years you'll need a full replacement. Marco made a note in the co-op ledger, Boiler Replacement Fund. Meetings grew longer. Some tenants pushed for immediate improvements, new paint, new mailboxes, better lighting in every hallway. Others argued for caution, saving every dollar for emergencies. Voices rose, hands pounded tables. Alina, steady as ever, reminded them, we are not landlords, we are owners. Owners plan for tomorrow as well as today. Despite tensions, the board voted to establish 2 funds, one for urgent repairs, one for long-term projects. It wasn't perfect, but it was compromise. The act of choosing together became as important as the choice itself. Outside, snow fell thick. Children played in the courtyard, rolling snowballs and laughing under twinkling lights strung between windows. For the first time in years, the building felt festive. Rosa organized the holiday dinner in the basement, with every tenant bringing a dish. Marco carved a donated turkey. Alina made trays of empanadas. Neighbors who once barely spoke now shared stories late into the night. Victor drove past that evening. He slowed his car, watching the warm glow from the windows, hearing muffled laughter carried on the cold air. His chest ached with something he refused to name. He pressed the accelerator and vanished into the night.
As the months passed, the co-op faced its first real test of unity. A tenant named Carlos, who had joined reluctantly, fell behind on his contributions. He had lost his job and was too proud to admit it. Rumors spread. Some demanded eviction. "We can't start letting people slide," one tenant insisted. "If one stops paying, others will too." The board met to decide. Tension filled the room. Carlos sat silently, eyes down. At last, Alina spoke. "We built this to prevent eviction, not to repeat it. We help each other. That is the point." Daniel proposed a hardship plan. Partial payments for 3 months, reviewed monthly. The co-op voted and the motion passed. Carlos lifted his head, tears in his eyes. "I won't forget this," he whispered. He found new work weeks later and repaid every cent. Trust, once fragile, grew stronger. Meanwhile, Rosa's tenants network gained momentum. Other buildings reached out, curious about Red Door's model. Workshops were held in the church hall, with Alina and Marco speaking as examples. "We are not experts," Marco always began. "We are just neighbors who refuse to give up." Media outlets returned. Reporters filmed children drawing chalk hearts around the red door. Headlines read, "From eviction to empowerment, a co-op's journey." The story spread beyond the city, inspiring tenant groups in other states. Red Door Homes became a symbol. Victor could not escape it. Investors abandoned him, preferring safer portfolios. His name, once associated with control, now drew whispers of mismanagement. At a conference, a colleague mentioned Red Door in passing. Victor's face darkened. He left the room without a word. Yet inside Red Door, not everything was smooth. Small disputes piled up. Some residents grumbled about the monthly meetings. Others resisted volunteering. "I just want to live here," one tenant said. "I didn't sign up for politics." Alina listened patiently. "Neither did I," she replied. "But here we are. Home means work." Jonah, though still helping, began to fade into the background. His role had been crucial at the start, but his life pulled him elsewhere. Before leaving, he met with Marco privately. "You've got this," he said. "You've grown into it. Keep the numbers honest, keep the people together. That's the secret." Marco clasped his hand. "We wouldn't be here without you." Jonah smiled. "That's the thing about building. It's never one person." Spring arrived, and with it, new challenges. A roof leak worsened, requiring costly repairs. Marta presented estimates that made the room fall silent. But instead of panic, there was planning. The co-op voted to increase contributions slightly, and most tenants agreed. Carlos, now fully employed, was the first to sign. "We're in this together," he said firmly. Alina expanded her catering further, often using the basement kitchen for prep. The smell of bread and spices filled the halls, reminding everyone that their building was alive. She hired 2 young residents as assistants, giving them work and training. "Opportunity begins at home," she told them. Marco, inspired by Marta's suggestion, enrolled in evening classes for property management. He studied regulations, maintenance schedules, and financial planning. It was not easy, but he felt purpose. Each lesson was another tool for the co-op's survival. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Leah tugged at Marco's sleeve. "Papa, can we paint the red door brighter?" she asked. "It's fading." Together, with brushes and laughter, the tenants repainted the door a vibrant crimson. Children added handprints around it. Alina traced the words, "Our home," above the frame. The building seemed to stand taller that night. Victor heard about the repainting through the network of whispers that still reached him. He closed his eyes and remembered the day he had ordered their eviction. The sound of boxes scraping against pavement. The small girl clutching her bear. He shook his head, muttering, "They should have stayed down." But deep in his chest, regret stirred, uninvited and unwelcome. By summer, Red Door Homes was thriving. Gardens bloomed along the courtyard. A bulletin board in the lobby listed events, tutoring sessions, cooking classes, movie nights. Strangers had become neighbors, neighbors had become family. Still, challenges remained. An investor pressured for repayment ahead of schedule. The co-op scrambled, calling emergency meetings, negotiating extensions. Stress ran high, tempers flared. But once again, they held together. The payment was made. The investor stayed. Marco sat on the steps one evening, exhausted but content. Alina joined him, handing him a plate of food. "We survived another storm," she said. He nodded, smiling faintly. "We'll survive the next two." Leah ran up with a flower from the garden. She placed it in Marco's hand. "For you, Papa, because you fixed our home." Marco's throat tightened. "No, little one," he whispered. "We fixed it together." The red door shone in the fading light, a beacon not just of survival, but of what people could build when they refused to bow to greed. And in its glow, Red Door Homes found its strength again and again.
The storm rolled in from the river without warning. One minute the sky was a harmless gray. The next it was a bruised wall, the kind that swallowed light. When the rain came, it came sideways. Wind pressed water under window sills and through hairline cracks, found forgotten seams, found every weakness a century-old building might hide. Marco was in the basement checking the boiler when he heard the first metallic knock from the roof drain, then another, closer, like a spoon against a kettle. He ran for the stairs. On the fourth floor, a pipe inside the ceiling groaned and split with a wet cough. Water began to sheet down the hallway paint like someone had tipped a bucket and forgotten to stop. Doors opened, tenants stared, half amazed, half afraid. "Towels!" Rosa shouted from the stairwell. "Buckets! Move rugs!" In seconds, the co-op's emergency text thread lit up. "Flood, level 4, East Hall." Marta arrived in a raincoat, already dialing the roofer. "Clogged scupper," she said, listening to the phone ring. "Wind drove leaves into the drain. Pressure built, water backed. We need to clear the roof right now." Marco nodded, grabbed a flashlight, and took the stairs 2 at a time. On the roof, the wind hit with enough force to lean a person. He crawled to the low parapet, found the drain mouth choked with leaves and shreds of plastic bags, and clawed it open. The water around him swirled, then spun, then rushed with a gulping roar that made the roof shiver. Inside, the temporary river slowed but didn't stop. The split pipe was the second problem. The plumber from 2B was already in the ceiling panel with a headlamp, swearing softly as he cinched a clamp. "This'll hold till morning," he said, "but we're going to need a real fix and drywall after." He glanced at Marta. She nodded. "We'll file the claim tonight. Document everything." Phones came out, photos, timestamps, a paper trail built even as people mopped water into buckets. Alina moved from door to door, checking on elders. She found Mrs. Alvarez sitting in a chair with a shawl over her shoulders, staring at the water trickling down her wall. "It's just a wall," she said gently. "We'll make it right." She took Mrs. Alvarez's hand and guided her to the dry side of the room, where Leah was already stacking books on higher shelves. "We saved the stories first," Leah said solemnly. Mrs. Alvarez smiled. Tears pinched in the corners of her eyes. By midnight, the worst had passed. The roof was draining, the clamp held, the hallway was damp but no longer a creak. People were exhausted, hair wet, socks ruined, laughter leaking out around the edges because sometimes you laugh when you should cry, or else you'd never stop crying at all. Rosa passed out paper cups of tea like medals. "We got it," she told anyone who would listen. "We got it this time." Morning showed the damage clearly. 2 units with soaked ceilings, hallway paint bubbled like blisters, a sag in the plaster where water had pooled. Marta walked the line with her clipboard, noting measurements, outlining the sequence: demo, dry, repair, repaint. "Insurance will cover much, but not all," she told the board that evening. "Deductibles heavy. We'll need to dip into the emergency fund." The room was quiet. The boiler replacement line item, the one they had started building, sat like a stone in Marco's mind. "We can rebuild the fund," Alina said.
What we can't rebuild is trust if we delay people's homes. Heads nodded. The vote was nearly unanimous. It still hurt to move the numbers. News of the flood reached beyond the building faster than anyone expected. A neighborhood blog posted photos of tenants in raincoats hauling buckets. The story framed it as proof co-ops could respond faster than absentee landlords. It was meant to praise, but Victor read it as an insult with a smiley face. At his office window, he stared at the rain-washed street and made a decision. 2 days later, he appeared at Red Door's front steps in a tailored coat that did not know the word soaked. He waited under the awning until Alina emerged from the lobby with a file of receipts. "I want a word," he said. She paused, neither welcoming nor dismissing. "I'm listening." He smiled in a way that had worked for years. He began, "You've done better than expected, but a flood is a flood. Repairs cost, funds drain. I can help." He pulled a letter from his coat, an offer, typed and signed. "I will purchase the building from the co-op at a premium over your acquisition price. Cash, immediate relief. You can pay back your investors, distribute a tidy sum to each tenant, and walk away with a win. Leave the headaches to professionals." Alina didn't take the paper. Her eyes stayed on his face. "The headaches are called our neighbors," she said. "We're not selling them." He shrugged. "You'd be selling to me, not them. And I'd run it right. I always have." Rosa stepped out then, catching the scene. She took the paper from Victor's hand, skimmed the numbers, and let out a small laugh that had no humor in it. "Your premium is less than our emergency fund. Try another block." She handed it back. Victor's smile thinned. "Think about it," he said, and left before anyone could answer. That night, the board met in the basement. The offer sat on the table like a live wire. Some tenants were angry, others, quiet, looked thoughtful. A few did back-of-napkin math. The payout could cover debts, tickets to easier lives. Alina saw the flickers and didn't judge them. Survival had taught everyone in the room to count first. "We'll discuss," she said. "No shame in being thorough." Marta, ever practical, laid out the costs and the runway. "Our reserves can handle the flood and leave enough to keep going. The boiler fund takes a hit, but we can restore it over 12 months at a slightly higher contribution. Insurance helps. The choice is not catastrophe or sale. The choice is hard work or surrender." Daniel spoke next, explaining the limited equity rules they had adopted. If the co-op ever sold, members wouldn't walk away with windfalls. The point was stability, not speculation. He's dangling a number he knows we can't keep. He's betting we'll forget our own bylaws. Debate ran long, but not bitter. People told truths about fatigue, about hope, about what the Red Door meant when you came home after a day that scraped your bones thin. At last, Alina asked for quiet. "We were once a hallway full of strangers. Now we are a hallway of owners. Owners choose. My vote is to repair, rebuild, and keep going." The vote was taken by secret ballot. When Rosa opened the box and counted, the result was 41-3. Reject the offer. A relief and a responsibility swept through the room in the same breath. Marco stacked the ballots like bricks. "Then we fix the wall," he said. Victor received the result on his phone the next morning. He had expected resistance, maybe even a show of defiance. He had not expected a landslide. Rage rose like heat, then dropped as quickly, replaced by something harder to carry, a memory, not of the eviction, he had plenty of those, but of the first building, when the paint still peeled and he had still believed management meant care. Somewhere along the way, care had been replaced by calculus, and calculus by contempt. He shoved the thought away and called his lawyer. "They'll stumble, and I'll be there when they do." Work began immediately. The demo crew moved fast, fans hummed in wet rooms, dehumidifiers drank the air. The plumber replaced the damaged section with a length of copper that glimmered like a promise. Volunteers painted after work, finish lines drawn in tape. Kids made "Caution, wet paint" signs with cartoon raindrops wearing frowns.
In the lobby, a schedule tracked who cooked for whom. Mrs. Alvarez had caldo every other night without fail. A week in, Marco woke to an email from the insurer. Partial approval pending one more inspection. He brought the notice to Marta, who had already drafted the response. "We'll get the rest," she said. "They always nibble first." The second inspection went smoothly. The check arrived 2 Fridays later, folded in a courier envelope that felt heavier than paper. The flood did something strange to the building. It broke something and healed something at the same time. People who had nodded in hallways now knew each other's shoe sizes from handing out dry socks. Arguments went differently after you had held a bucket next to the person you disagreed with. Meetings were still meetings, opinions and edges, but the sharpness had dulled into a shape that fit in a hand. One afternoon, a package arrived at the office with no return address. Inside was a plain envelope with a bank check for $5,000, made out to Red Door Homes Cooperative, Emergency Fund. No note. Alina looked at Marta. Anonymous? Marta shrugged. Blessed. Rosa joked about a guardian angel who liked clean gutters. The money went straight into reserves. No one mentioned Victor. By fall, drywall was patched, ceilings painted, and the hallway once blistered now smooth and bright. The Red Door got a fresh coat again because Leah insisted the building should look like it felt alive. On a Saturday, people gathered in the courtyard for a dry house potluck. There were too many casseroles and not enough chairs. Someone rolled out a small speaker, someone else set out paper lanterns. When evening came on, the lights made the brick glow. Alina stood with a paper plate and watched Marco show a group of teenagers how to snake a drain without breaking the trap. It looked like a class, like the building teaching itself. Later that night, after the last pan was wrapped in
The new year dawned with frost on the windows and resolve in the halls. Red Door Homes had survived the flood, rebuilt its fund, and proven to itself that storms could be weathered. But survival was only the first chapter. Now came the harder work, building a future that was more than emergencies and patchwork. At the January meeting, Marta placed a thick folder on the table. Long-term capital plan, she said. The words made some tenants shift in their chairs. She explained calmly, roof replacement in 5 years, boiler in 2, window upgrades for energy efficiency, hallway rewiring in 7. These are not optional, they are the bones of your home. The numbers were daunting. A hush fell. Marco leaned forward, scanning the pages. "This is heavy," he admitted, "but we've carried heavier. We start with the boiler fund, then we move step by step." Alina added, "We've proven we can act together in crisis. Now we must act together in preparation." Votes were cast. Contributions were raised slightly, spread fairly across members. Not everyone was happy, but the decision passed. The first stone of the long road was laid. Meanwhile, Rose's tenant network grew into something larger than anyone expected. Other buildings, hearing Red Door's story, began exploring co-op paths. A coalition formed. Tenants, nonprofits, lawyers, sympathetic city officials. Red Door Homes became the unofficial headquarters, its basement turning into a hub of workshops and strategy sessions. Alina often found herself speaking at city forums. Marco gave tours of the building to skeptical groups. Rosa, fierce and tireless, answered phones at all hours. "We lit one candle," she told Marco one night. "Now people want torches." The attention drew Victor's gaze again. He followed the news quietly, each mention of Red Door a small sting. His own empire had thinned, 2 properties sold at a loss. Investors no longer answered calls as quickly. Tenants in other buildings questioned repairs, citing Red Door as an example. The ground under him felt less certain, and he hated it. But even Victor, in his bitterness, could not deny a sliver of fascination. Late at night, when the city hummed low, he sometimes read tenant rights forums under a false name.
He told himself it was reconnaissance. Still, when he saw photos of the red door covered in children's handprints, something in his chest tightened. He would shut his laptop quickly, muttering, "Sentiment, nothing more." Inside Red Door, life settled into new patterns. Marco balanced his new job with evening classes. He often fell asleep with textbooks open, highlighters still in his hand. Alina's catering flourished. She began employing 2 other women from the building, turning work into shared prosperity. Rosa organized a food pantry in the basement, funded by small grants. Leah thrived, running through the halls with friends, her laughter echoing. She told anyone who would listen, "This is our house." But not all was easy. As the co-op grew stronger, disagreements sharpened. One group pushed for faster upgrades, arguing that waiting would cost more later. Another argued for caution, afraid of overextending. At one meeting, voices rose to shouts. A tenant stormed out. For a moment, the fragile unity felt as if it might splinter. Alina stood then, not raising her voice but steady as stone. "We built this to stop being powerless. Power means choices, even hard ones. But no matter how loud we argue, we must leave this room together. If we forget that, then Victor wins without lifting a hand." The silence afterward was heavy, but healing. Slowly, heads nodded. The meeting resumed, calmer. Spring brought new growth. Flowers bloomed in the courtyard garden. Children helped Rosa plant herbs along the fence, mint and basil and cilantro perfuming the air. The building no longer smelled of neglect. It smelled of meals, of soil, of soap after work. The city took notice. Red Door Homes was awarded a small grant for energy-efficient lighting. New LED fixtures brightened hallways, cutting utility costs. A ribbon-cutting ceremony was held with the council member praising the co-op. Cameras clicked. Alina, speaking again, reminded everyone, "This is not charity. This is partnership. We are not a story of rescue. We are a story of resilience." Victor saw the coverage on television. He poured himself another drink and muttered, "Resilience doesn't balance books." Yet his glass in his hand trembled slightly. As the summer approached, another test arrived. An outside investor approached Daniel privately with an offer. Partner with the co-op, inject capital for renovations in exchange for a share of ownership. The terms were tempting: fast repairs, modern upgrades, less financial strain. But it came with a catch. The co-op would lose full control. Decisions could be overridden by the investor's stake. The board wrestled with it for days. Jonah, who returned for a visit, warned them, "Once you give away control, you never get it back. Remember why you fought for this in the first place." Marta added, "Outside money is not always evil, but ownership is a compass. Don't sell the needle." Debate grew fierce. Some argued it was practical. Others called it betrayal. Finally, Marco spoke. "When we stood on the sidewalk with our boxes, we dreamed of stability, not luxury. I'd rather live in a building we control with peeling paint than in a palace where someone else decides if we stay." Alina added softly, "Comfort without control is still captivity." The vote came down to the wire. By a margin of 5, the co-op rejected the investor's offer. Relief and worry mingled, but pride held strongest. "We choose ourselves," Rosa declared again and again. In the weeks that followed, the decision proved itself. Tenants rolled up their sleeves and took on more volunteer shifts. Repairs moved slower, but they moved. The building stood not as sleek, but as sturdy, each crack filled with trust, and trust, they learned, could outlast paint. Victor, hearing of the rejection, scoffed aloud. "Idiots," he muttered. Yet he did not feel the satisfaction he expected. Instead, he felt a strange respect, and acknowledgement, grudging but real. They'd rather starve than bow, and somewhere deep inside, he envied them. The summer ended with a festival in the courtyard. Tables lined with food, lanterns strung high, music filling the night.
Children performed a play they had written themselves, a story about a greedy giant who tried to steal a house, only for the neighbors to join together and keep it safe. The crowd laughed and clapped. Even Marta, who rarely smiled, wiped her eyes. Marco watched Leah bow at the end, her smile wide. He felt Alina's hand slip into his. "We are teaching them something they'll never forget," she whispered. He nodded, eyes misting. "We're teaching ourselves too." That night, as lights dimmed and the red door gleamed under the moon, the co-op knew they were not just surviving, they were building a legacy. And for the first time, Victor Hale, watching from a distance he could not cross, admitted to himself that the building he had lost was stronger without him than it had ever been under his hand. He clenched his fists, but in the silence of his heart, he knew it was true.
Autumn brought crisp mornings and golden leaves to the courtyard, but inside the co-op, cracks began to show. Not in the walls, but in the people. Ownership had given them pride, but it had also given them pressure. Pressure, even shared, finds places to leak. It began with money again. A tenant named Evelyn, who had voted against rejecting the investor's offer, grew increasingly vocal. "We're being foolish," she argued at meetings. "We could have had new kitchens by now. We could have had air conditioning. Instead, we're holding bake sales to patch our roof." Others agreed quietly. Alina listened carefully, refusing to silence dissent. "We promised democracy," she reminded the board. "Democracy is noisy." One night, voices rose higher than ever. Marco clashed with Evelyn, pounding the table. "We didn't fight this hard to sell pieces of ourselves for comfort. A house isn't just appliances, it's freedom." Evelyn shot back. "What good is freedom if the ceiling leaks on your bed?" The room erupted with overlapping voices until Rosa banged a pot with a spoon. "Enough!" she shouted. The clang startled everyone into silence. We don't have to like each other all the time, but we must remember, we are not enemies. Victor was the enemy. Don't do his work for him. The reminder hit deep. The fight cooled, though the tension lingered. The co-op decided to hold a retreat. One Saturday set aside not for budgets or repairs, but for conversation. In the church hall where it had all begun, they sat in circles and told their stories. Carla spoke of the shame of falling behind and the pride of catching up. Mrs. Alvarez spoke of raising her children in those very walls. Evelyn admitted her fear. She had grown up poor and never stopped dreading scarcity. Alina took her hand. "Fear doesn't leave overnight," she said softly. "That's why we hold each other up." By evening, the mood had shifted, not solved, but softened. People walked home with lighter steps. The red door, glowing under the streetlight, felt once again like a promise instead of a question. But challenges outside were growing. Victor, though quieter, had not disappeared. He had shifted tactics. Through proxies, he purchased small shares in other nearby buildings. He began positioning himself as a landlord who could compete with co-ops, offering amenities and professional management. His ads ran in local papers. "Don't gamble on amateurs, trust the experts." Though he never named Red Door, everyone knew the target. The co-op responded, not with ads, but with proof. They opened their books to members monthly, showing every dollar accounted for. They posted updates on repairs, no matter how small. They kept promises. Slowly, word spread. Red Door wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and honesty was worth more than marble lobbies. Meanwhile, Marco's classes paid off. He passed his certification exam and was now licensed in property management. The board cheered when he brought home the certificate. "Our own manager," Rosa declared. "No landlord needed." Marco blushed, but pride burned in his chest. He hung the paper in the basement meeting room next to Leah's Red Door drawing. Leah herself had grown taller, surer. She started a small club with other kids called Doorkeepers. They swept the courtyard, watered flowers, and taped up signs with rules like "no littering" and "help neighbors carry groceries." Adults chuckled, but many followed the children's lead. The spirit of stewardship spread. Yet not all spirits were light. One evening, the co-op received a letter from the city. Property taxes were increasing.
The number was not catastrophic, but it was enough to unsettle the budget. Emergency meetings followed. Should they raise monthly contributions again? Cut repair funds? Delay the boiler replacement? Voices trembled with fatigue. "We can't keep asking people for more," Evelyn argued. "We'll break." Marco countered, "If we fall behind, we lose more than money. We lose ground." The room grew tense. Then Alina spoke quietly. "What if we open the basement as a rental hall? Birthday parties, community events. We can earn, not just pay." The idea sparked interest. Within weeks, permits were filed. The basement, freshly painted and fitted with folding tables, became a small but steady source of income. First came a birthday party, then a church group, then a tutoring program. The revenue helped cover the tax increase without raising contributions. Pride swelled again, not just in paying bills, but in creating opportunity. Victor heard about the rental space from one of his contacts. He scoffed, but inside he felt something else, a pang of envy. Once, he had been the man who saw opportunity in every corner. Now he only saw threats. As winter approached, a storm hit harder than before. This time, snow piled high, pressing on roofs, clogging drains. The boiler, patched too many times, sputtered. One night, it went out completely. The building went cold. Panic rippled. Marco and the plumber worked through the night. The board authorized emergency rental heaters. Rosa and other tenants opened their apartments for elders and families with small children, sharing warmth. The community pulled blankets, shared food, and waited. By dawn, the boiler roared back to life, repaired again, but barely. Varda shook her head. This is it. No more patches, replace or risk collapse. The cost was steep, higher than anything yet, but the co-op had no choice. A vote was called. Every hand, even Evelyn's, rose in favor. The replacement fund emptied and a loan was secured. The new boiler arrived weeks later, gleaming steel and pipes humming steady. When the heat filled the building, cheers rose. Children danced barefoot on warm floors. "Worth every penny," Marco said, wiping sweat from his brow. That night, sitting on the steps outside, Alina leaned against him. "We are always one crisis from breaking." She shook her head. "No, we are one crisis from proving ourselves again and again. That's the difference." Victor passed by the next day. He saw the new vent steaming against the cold sky. He stopped, staring. For a moment, he remembered his first winter as a landlord, when he too had overseen a new boiler installation. Back then, tenants had thanked him. Now tenants thanked each other. He turned away quickly, but the memory clung like frost. Inside Red Door, life moved forward. The hardship had made them stronger, closer. And though storms would come, inside and out, the building stood, Red Door gleaming, a beacon of what neighbors could become when they chose each other over fear. The board's minutes for December ended with a single line again. "We are still here. We are still together."
By the time crocuses pushed through the soil along the courtyard fence, Red Door homes felt older and steadier, like a tree that had held 2 winters and learned their tricks. The new boiler hummed with a confident throat. The basement rental hall booked every weekend, birthdays with too much frosting, church teas that smelled of cinnamon, tutoring sessions where kids wrestled math until it gave way. On Sunday mornings, sunlight slipped through stairwell glass and made the freshly painted banister glow. Marco's certificate, property manager, framed in a simple mat, hung beside Leah's drawing. People pointed to both like they were family photos. Alina's catering listed community kitchen on its website now, and it meant it. Rosa kept a ledger of pantry shelves the way some people kept songbooks. Her column sang anyway. Evelyn still argued at meetings, but mostly on substance now. Timelines, materials, vendors. After one vote, she leaned over to Alina and said, almost shy, "I argue because I care." Alina squeezed her hand. "I know." In March, a message came through Rosa's tenant network. A building across town had hit the same financial reef Red Door once knew by smell. The owner had defaulted. A trustee sale was set for late April. Families there were dissolving into panic. The flyer looked familiar. A phone number, the word auction in ink that sank into paper like a bruise. Red Door did not hesitate.
They called it, half joking, half not, the Second Door Project. The church hall filled again, this time with strangers who would not be strangers for long. Marco stood at the whiteboard and mapped the ladder: organize, incorporate, partner, pre-app, escrow, management, bid, match. Daniel translated jargon to bone. Marta explained the ugly side of roofs and the beautiful predictability of routine work. Jonah, who had said he was done twice already, showed up anyway with a laptop and the exact same pizza from the exact same place. Habits, he said, and everyone laughed like they'd earned it. Leah, taller now, took the little kids to a corner table and taught them how to draw doors. Red is traditional, she told them solemnly, but you can choose your color later when you're owners. She wrote doorkeepers on a piece of paper and taped it to a chair like a flag. Across the city, Victor read about the second door in a paper he claimed not to read. He had sold 2 more properties to service debt. The office that once pulsed with calls and calendars now sounded like a refrigerator at night. He closed the door and sat, not moving until the light through the blinds made stripes across his shoes. His phone buzzed. He didn't look. At last, he opened a drawer and took out an envelope, bank letterhead, the same thick weight of the anonymous check he'd sent months ago. He stared at it a while, then put it back. He picked up his coat and left, not sure where he was going, only that he could not sit still inside the life he'd made. The second door families were different and the same. A nurse working night shifts, a barber with hands like careful hooks, an auntie who'd raised 3 households worth of kids and remembered every birthday. Some wanted to fight. Some only wanted sleep. Alina told them the story again, not as myth, but as map. She told them about the day Leah's bear hit the puddle and the moment a folder on a bank table turned into a key and a lock. She didn't hide the long days or the hunger. She said, "It is a staircase. We climb it together. It has more steps than you think and fewer than you fear." At the April auction, Red Door stood behind the new group the way a hand rests on someone's shoulder before a hard sentence. The bank took the property back with a credit bid. The window opened. People stepped through. Between then and closing would be 30 days again, phone calls, signatures, the slow thunder of money turning into paper, turning into a deed. Midway through the scramble, a city council hearing landed on the calendar. A vote for a permanent right of first refusal ordinance with clearer timelines, small acquisition grants, and rules to prevent fake bids designed only to burn time. The coalition packed the chamber. Cameras blinked like patient insects. Alina spoke, voice even, hand steady. Rosa spoke, voice hot enough to melt some of the varnish off the podium. Evelyn spoke, surprising herself when her voice did not shake. She said that democracy sounds like argument, and responsibility sounds like chores, and both are worth it. Marco spoke last because he liked beginnings, but trusted endings. Then Leah asked to speak. Alina hesitated, then nodded. Leah stepped up with a sheet of paper that had smudges where her eraser had fought bravely. She read, "This is our house. When it was cold, we fixed the heat. When it was wet, we fixed the roof. When someone was scared, we held their hand. Please make it so other kids can do that too." She looked up, and it was not a trick. It was a mirror. The ordinance passed 9-2. The chamber made a sound like relief. Miss Patel stood near the back, hands folded, eyes bright. On the steps afterwards, Daniel hugged her, surprising them both. He said, "You kept the door open the first time." She shook her head. "You walked through." A week before the second door closing, Victor appeared at the church hall. He stood outside for a long minute, reading the same bulletin board that had once held a flyer that changed a world. Then he went in. People glanced up, wary. He found Alina by the coffee urn pouring for a grandmother whose cane leaned like a sentence against the table. "I'd like to talk," he said. His voice was smaller, not meek, just less filled with his own echo.
Alina handed the grandmother her cup, then faced him. "All right." They sat in a side room with a window that overlooked the alley where the dumpster always needed nagging. Victor folded his hands. "I was a good landlord once, at the beginning. I fixed things, I knew names, I stopped." He swallowed. "The numbers got louder, or I got quieter. I don't know." Alina didn't help him. She waited. The silence treated both of them like adults. "I want to sell a building. Not the one I lost. Another. It's smaller. The debt is ugly, but not fatal. I would like to sell it to a co-op at an honest price. I don't want my name on a plaque. I don't want a story. I want it not to be mine anymore, and I want to do one thing right while I still recognize that word." Alina looked at him for a long time. "You're late. Very." He dropped his eyes. "I am." She nodded toward the hall. "Talk to Daniel. To Marta. The price will be math, not nostalgia. The process will be rules, not wishes. If you can do that, maybe a door opens for you too." He let out a breath like he'd been underwater. "Thank you." It was not absolution. It was permission to try.
The second door closed on a Thursday, under a sky so blue it looked edited. The families signed in the same bank conference room where Red Door's signatures had tried. The gray-haired manager, a veteran of both battles now, stamped with a small smile she saved for people who brought their own pens. Keys made little chimes across the table. Children did a small, unruly dance. Someone cried. Someone always cried. That weekend, Red Door came to help with move-in and minor repairs. The first act was ceremonial and practical. Paint the entrance. The new co-op had chosen a color that wasn't red, deep ocean blue, the kind that made the brass knob glow like a moon. "Every door is a promise," Rosa told the kids. "The color is just the outfit." Leah handed a roller to a little boy who had watched the whole morning with a seriousness that belonged to someone who had slept on a couch too long. "Your turn," she said. He reached up. Blue curved across primer in a stroke that made his mouth open into a small O of joy. Victor did not attend, though he stood across the street long enough to watch a ladder go up and a tarp come down, and a neighbor laugh in a way that made the air feel rounder. He turned away and walked until his feet hurt, then walked more. A week later, a donation came to the Coalition Fund with no name and a memo line that read simply, "For the next door." No one asked. Everyone knew. The years did not become a postcard. Pumps failed. A leak returned in a new place. Taxes nipped like small, stubborn dogs. People moved in, moved out, grew old, were born. But the co-ops held, not because a law made them perfect, but because people understood the maintenance schedule of dignity. Meetings still ran long, arguments still ran hot, budget lines still made stomachs clench. And yet, lights turned on, heat rose, gardens grew, children ran in courtyards that did not tremble. On Red Door's 5th anniversary, the courtyard filled again with tables and lanterns. There were speeches, shorter now because everyone already knew the lines that mattered. Jonah roasted a chicken in a way that made people demand measurements he didn't have. Marta announced she'd train 2 assistants next year, so I can finally take a vacation and you won't panic. Miss Patel, promoted now, brought a proclamation nobody would hang but everybody photographed anyway. Daniel arrived late, for once, because 3 buildings had called the same afternoon. Evelyn lifted a glass and surprised herself by toasting to, not efficiency or outcomes, but to patience. She laughed when people teased her. "Don't get used to it," she warned. Rosa cried at the first chord of a song and laughed at herself by the second. Alina stood at the edge of the yard watching a knot of 11-year-olds argue about rule number 3 on the doorkeeper's sign
and thought, "We did not beat a man. We built a place." Marco slipped an arm around her waist. "Remember the first night?" he murmured. "The boxes on the sidewalk, the rain." She nodded, eyes on Leah, who was explaining, hands flying, how to keep paint from dripping when you cut the edge. "I remember the puddle," Alina said, "and the bear, and the way a folder sounded when it closed." Music rose. The sky turned the color of the inside of a peach. Someone set off a sparkler. Kids shrieked with ceremonial terror. Elders clapped. A gust ran along the fence and the lanterns trembled but did not fall. Later, when the dishes were stocked and the chairs folded, and the night had put its arm around the building's shoulders, the board filed into the basement for a last quick vote on whether to approve 2 window replacements that couldn't wait. They argued a little and then agreed a lot. Rosa wrote the minutes in her square, patient hand, and, as always, saved the final line for last. "We are still here." She paused, added a comma, and this time wrote more. "We are still here, and the door is open." Upstairs, the red door caught the hallway light and gave it back. Across town, a blue door was drying, deep and sure. Between them, a handful of other colors had begun to appear on streets that used to be only rent in silence. In a city that could devour and forget, there were now places that remembered on purpose. It would never be easy. It would always be theirs.
The story of Red Door Homes did not end with 1 building, or even 2. What began as desperation on a wet sidewalk had become a rhythm across the city. By the next year, 3 more tenant groups had organized and closed on their buildings. Each chose their own door color: green, yellow, brown. Each painted with handprints. Each held their own potlucks. Each argued late into the night over budgets and cleaning schedules. And each wrote the same sentence in their first meeting minutes: "We are still here." Alina became a quiet but steady voice on panels and at conferences. She refused titles like activist or leader. "I'm a mother and a neighbor," she told reporters. "I just learned not to stop at business is business." She still ran her catering business, still braided Leah's hair, still stood in the basement folding chairs into circles when meetings dragged. But people listened when she spoke, because she did not speak to shine. She spoke to steady. Marco, now working full-time in property management, guided other co-ops through their first crises. He taught them how to read boilers, how to keep ledgers honest, how to file insurance claims without delay. He carried a small notebook where he wrote things down. Roof, replace every 25 years. Stairs, paint handrails yearly. But also, neighbors, call before problems shout. He told everyone who asked, it's not about buildings. It's about people who refuse to let go. Rose's tenants network had grown into a coalition with chapters across the state. She traveled with folders under her arm and fire in her voice. She was welcomed with applause wherever she went, but she always came back to Red Door, apron dusted with flour, laughing at children who demanded her empanadas taste exactly the same as last time. Even Evelyn, once the loudest skeptic, had become a believer. She still argued. It was her nature. But now her arguments sharpened the co-op instead of fracturing it. She was elected treasurer after 3 years, her ledgers precise and her voice respected. Democracy, she said with a wry smile, is paperwork with feelings. And Leah, once the girl who sat on a wet box with her bear, had grown into the building's heartbeat. She was 13 now, quick and certain, running the Doorkeepers Club with a seriousness that made adults grin. The club had rules, projects, and even dues, 1 piece of candy per month. They swept, watered, painted, and kept promises. When asked why she cared so much, Leah shrugged. Because when I was small, the door saved me. Now,
I saved the door. Across the city, Victor Hale was a ghost of his old self. He had sold most of his holdings, repaid enough to quiet the worst creditors, and lived in a modest apartment no one would have expected. He was not destitute, but neither was he the man who once made neighbors tremble. He avoided the spotlight, walking streets where he was not recognized. But sometimes at night, he passed buildings with painted doors, red, blue, green, and paused. He never went in. He never asked for forgiveness. He simply stood for a moment, head bowed, then moved on. One spring afternoon, he slipped a plain envelope under the office door at Red Door Homes. Inside was a short note written in a careful, almost unfamiliar hand. "You taught me what I forgot. I cannot undo, but I can step aside. Keep the doors open. V." There was no return address, no request. Just the note, folded once, left like a confession to air. Alina read it, then set it in the file marked history. She did not tell the board to hate him nor to absolve him. She simply said, "We keep moving." And they did.